There. All right, let's go over rule number 7 of the greater set of rules for the discernment of spirits that Ignatius gives us. Now, before I go there, though, rule number 7 is very similar to the beginning sets of rules talked about and the very first set of rules, where we see that one's own disposition has an effect on what is consoling and what causes desolation. But we have an image here, and it's really fitted well within the second set of rules. And it'd be a good thing to read them together, perhaps, but I'll let you do that on your own. It's a Google away to find these rules. But here's rule number 7. Persons who are going from good to better, the good angel touches sweetly, lightly, gently, as when a drop of water soaks into a sponge. Good image, right? Here comes a drop, sponge, gentle, sweet, light. That's how, if you have a good disposition, state of grace, you're moving from good to better, then God is moving with that. It's going to feel like there's a kind of continuity there. Now, the evil spirit touches a person like that sharply, with noise and disturbance, as when the drop of water falls on a rock. Good images, love it. Those who are going from bad to worse, the aforesaid spirits touch in a way contrary to the way they touch those going from good to better. So, in other words, if I'm going from good to evil, if I'm in that direction, then diabolical things are more consoling, and things of God are that they're going to hit my conscience. It's going to ping me. So just because I have that disquiet doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing. If I'm becoming bad, the disquiet can be God's way of bringing me back around. But if I'm already turned around, if I'm already going toward God, then I should suspect that there's going to be some peace. Now, it's not always clearly the case that it's just one or the other. There's usually some bit of a mixed bag. Not all of me is given over to God. Parts need to surrender. So if God starts pinging that, maybe that's a part that needs to be converted. What are those things in me that need renewal? And examine is going to help us with that, to really be honest with ourselves as we move forward with it. Now, the cause of this contrariety is that the disposition of the one touched is either contrary to or concordant with each of the said angels, good or bad. For when it is contrary, the angels enter perceptibly with clamor and observable signs. When it is concordant, they come in quietly, as one comes into his own house through an open door. So, just good stuff. John of the Cross comments on Psalm 42:7, where we hear deep calling to deep, or an abyss to an abyss. He says that an abyss of light summons another abyss of light, and the abyss of darkness calls to another abyss of darkness, each like evoking its like and communicating itself to it. This is from the Living Flame. So a couple qualifications on this rule. Inspiration from the good spirit may initially be disturbing in a progressing Christian, though then it brings peace. So even if you are moving from good to bad, at first there might be a bit of a clamor, because if you look in the Bible, all the angels, when they come, they always have to say, don't be afraid, because it can be so remarkable that it can be disquieting. The key is that it doesn't stay disquieting, that the angel of light consoles. He says, do not be afraid. Right? Jesus says, do not be afraid. Now, it's the reverse end of the contrary spirit. The devil might come in like an angel of light with consolation, but he's not going to keep up the act. Eventually, you're going to be disquieted. So this insight is corroborated from St. Anthony of the Desert, one of our early desert fathers of the 4th century. Went out to the desert and battled the demons all day long. Now, his life is given to us through St. Athanasius, so we have another doctor of the church relaying another saint's life. It was very influential, this text. It was one of those catalysts, one of a number of catalysts that helped St. Augustine in his conversion. Now, St. Anthony says this: if, being men, some fear the vision of the good, those who appear immediately take fear away, as Gabriel did in the case of Zechariah, and the angel did who appeared to the women at the Holy Sepulchre, and as Jesus did, who said to the shepherds in the gospel, fear not, as he did, who said to the shepherds in the gospel, fear not. Whenever, therefore, you have seen aught and are afraid, if your fear is immediately taken away, and in place of it comes joy unspeakable, cheerfulness, courage, renewed strength, calmness of thought, and all those I named before, boldness and love toward God, take courage and pray. For joy and a settled state of soul show the holiness of Him who is present. On the other end, right, the clamor and all these other things that might come late, right? The key difference, even for St. Anthony, is that the fear that might come on the front end is taken away by a good angel. The consolation on the front end turns into fear, clamor, and bad, right? Desolation on the back end for one who's progressing from good to bad. Now, another piece that Jules Toner tells us, another caveat, and I've already mentioned it, is that peace can be mingled with fear and pain at times. It's not always so. We're not always so pure in our directionality that it is clearly the case that it's all in, all peace or not. I'm a mixed bag, and so some of the reactions might be a bit of a mixed bag. But there should be some sort of dominance here. Otherwise, these wouldn't be helpful rules at all. So peace might dominate, though they might be there. There might be some fear, might be a little bit of pain, but peace would dominate. Even in the maturing Christian, dimensions of his personality not yet set toward God may have some disturbances at his inspiration. Right? Okay. Now, Jules Toner also says, he says, while the evil spirit can begin with the disposition and fundamental life movement of a spiritually maturing person, what he will not do is to sustain the evil of light act. Sooner or later, some sign will appear, some perceptible clash between him and the person whom he is touching. Otherwise, right, if he just kept up the act, to do so would be to promote Christian growth, a thing totally contrary to the evil spirit's connatural tendency. So he can't keep it up. In fact, this is a criteria that Teresa of Avila uses to get out of bad advice at some point given to her at the beginning of her spiritual walk by some spiritual directors that were not so helpful. They seem to imply that some of her spiritual experiences were from the devil and should be rejected. But she eventually concludes in line with Ignatius' rules. She says, the difference was very great in every respect and no fancy, such as I could clearly see. As I had previously been so wicked, I concluded I could not believe that if the devil were doing this to delude me and drag me down to hell, he would make use of means which so completely defeated their own ends, by taking away vices and making me virtuous and strong. For it was quite clear to me that these experiences, that were from God, right, had immediately made me a different person, that she became better. The tree was known by its fruits. So this is all one long commentary on Jesus' insight. Tree is known by its fruit. All right, so a little bit of Teresa of Avila, a little Anthony of the Desert. Next time, rule number 8, and this will be the last rule of our set of rules for the discernment of spirits.